I usually start with one ingredient, and then I think about, inside of different ethnicities, what are the classic pairings for that ingredient. So let's say I'm thinking about winter squash, like an acorn squash. Acorn squash is sort of a classically American thing. So what are some of the pairings? There is maple syrup. When I think acorn squash, I sort of think Native American vibes. So certain kinds of nuts, maybe maple syrup, brown sugar, molasses, that sort of flavor family. And then I think about a way to execute it that is really simple. So in terms of acorn squash, the big problem is peeling it. It's really not fun to peel. So I immediately know I'm not going to peel it. And then I think about how I want it to look and how I want it to feel and what texture I want it to have. So I want to bring out that like caramelized, not crispy, but have an edge. I want to get rid of the mush of squash. So the more I want to have a hard edge or a caramelized edge, then I know I'm going to have to create surfaces, because you only have a hard edge on a surface. So I then make a commitment to slicing the acorn squash without peeling it. So I'm going to slice it into, let's say, 12 or 16 slices, because then I have, 28 to 32 sides. And I could then saute it, but I'm dealing with such a big quantity of squash slices now, I'd have to saute it in 5 batches, so forget about that. And so I'm going to roast it on a sheet pan. So I know that to do that, I'm going to toss it with some olive oil. And then how do I incorporate those flavors that I was interested in the beginning? And I know the acorn squash is going to take a little while to roast because it's a pretty hard root vegetable. So I know if I incorporate any of those flavors in the beginning, they're going to burn. Brown sugar will burn, maple syrup will burn. So I decide whatever I'm going to do with those flavors, I'm going to do after the squash is already cooked. So I decide to just roast the squash with the olive oil and a little bit of salt in the oven for, let's say, 40 minutes, something like that. I'm not going to flip it because I don't like flipping, because that's another step that's usually not necessary. And I'm going to leave it in there till it develops. It'll have a little bit more crispiness on the bottom, and then on the top it'll get a bit of crispiness, but not too much. And to incorporate those flavors, I don't want to just sprinkle something on top because it's just a bit flat. So I want to put something on top that's going to be a carrier for those flavors. So I try to think of something that'll spread out a lot, and something that is either very easy to make or you can buy in some way. So I decide to use breadcrumbs because they'll add a little extra crunch, and to flavor them with brown sugar because that's one of the integral flavors I was looking for in the first place. And I want the breadcrumbs to have that same kind of Thanksgiving-y depth of flavor and nuttiness. So I saute them in a little bit of butter to give them that nuttiness. Take them out, let them cool, add the brown sugar. Maybe I'll try to add the brown sugar while they're in the pan and discover, as I happen to have discovered, that the brown sugar melts too much and it all gloms together and it's not right. So I add the brown sugar when the breadcrumbs have cooled. I toss that together. Those become sweetened breadcrumbs. I pull the acorn squash out of the oven, mount it on a platter, which the way things look is very, very important to me. Everybody eats with their eyes first. And I love that very rustic, easy look. 17th century Dutch painting is my holy grail for how food should look. So I pile them onto a plate and then just toss these sweetened breadcrumbs on top. And it looks great. It has all of those essential flavors. And it was done with the minimum number of actions on my part.